I have shown quite literally several thousands of homes. I've sold hundreds of homes. And the idea of a showing is something that I'm extremely familiar with, probably more familiar than most people, and also weirdly passionate about. I think how you go about a showing is extremely important. So on today's video, we're talking tips to do a showing, to do it well, and ultimately get your client to the closing table. How's it going, friends? My name is Jesse Lynch. I run multiple real estate teams around the United States, and on this channel and in general, I'm really only interested in working with people who want to do things a little bit differently, want to do real estate on their own terms. So if that's you, come hang out for a while, subscribe to this channel, click the bell to get notified. And today we're talking about tips for showing a house. Number one, there's like 100 different styles of lockboxes. Some of them are the bane of my existence. Don't sweat it, you'll figure it out. None of them are rocket science, just some are worse than others. And there's a Supra key. Sometimes you get a big old key ring with like a bunch of keys and then you just have to figure it out. It is what it is. People will not care that you're there trying to work through which key it is. They can see what you're dealing with. They can see that you have multiple keys that are not labeled at all, like I currently have happening right now. But the Supra key is one that I would recommend before you have a client. Supra key is weird. It's a very unique situation, and I would recommend that you test it on another Supra key, whether that's an agent or your broker within your brokerage. If they have one that you can test it on, cool. Otherwise, you're probably gonna have to find a showing that you can do that's not gonna displace people living there, by the way. Find some way to test your Supra key so you don't show up to your first showing or to one of the first showings with a client. It has a Supra key and it doesn't work, because I made that mistake. This cabin, this A-frame cabin, is a listing of mine, but it's also my cabin that I own with some business partners. We've decided to try to sell it to see what the market will give us, and it just hit coming soon today, but Paul and I were up here a few days ago kind of zhuzhing up a couple of the outbuildings. And there's a little bit more to do, and so that's why we're back up here. But it seems like a good place to talk about how to crush it at a showing. I think one of the more underrated elements that can exist as far as showings are concerned is sort of being a helpful first line of defense against a bad home. And I kind of think of it as one of the things that I'd like to protect people from is spending money on an inspection on a home that I know is not going to inspect well. And so ultimately, what that means is understanding how a house goes together, understanding the important and expensive elements within a house, understanding the things that are difficult to fix or repair or replace, and really just not being afraid to call a spade, not being afraid to point out the negatives in a house. I think my understanding of how houses work has basically become a little bit of a superpower. A lot of people are gonna tell you like, oh, know the stats of the homes before you see them. And like that can be helpful. And people will for sure ask you like, how many bedrooms was this? How many square feet was this? How many bathrooms? But I think it's actually better or more important to know what to look for that they're not advertising, because they're not gonna tell you, hey, this furnace is 30 years old and is basically on its last leg. They will not tell you that. And so if you can be that line of defense because you know what to look for that they aren't talking about, the things that they're kind of trying to, you know, just tuck under the rug, no pun intended, then you will be more helpful to your client than just knowing the basic stats. Anybody can go on Zillow and find out bedroom, bathroom, square footage. So take it to that next level and you will take much better care of your clients. You'll have a much better reputation. And if they don't think that you're trying to sell them something that shouldn't be sold to them, they will begin to trust you more and more. Calling out a house that sucks, that's a problem, that's just full of problems, will help you get more clients because you will come off and you will be more trustworthy. I found some extra stuff from, I don't know, previous projects of mine that I was like, oh, I should use that to stage the cabinet. Busy day today, and this video is gonna be a good one. I'm basically just shopping out of my garage because there's a few more things, a few finishing touches for the cabinet. We got some like cups, like some like kind of campy cups. I kind of want it to look like kind of up north campy kind of feel. And then I realized I have a bunch of old like dishes from previous projects, and I think we could stage the dining table in this room really nicely. We wanted to give this room some identity, and we think that this dining table and these fairy lights and all that like really do a lot to give it some purpose, because when we got it, it had basically no purpose at all. And one bit of let's say classical advice that I actually do agree with, because I really think there's a lot of dinosaurs out there doing stuff the old way. One bit of classical advice that I do think is very helpful and will come in handy is knowing the areas, knowing the neighborhoods that you're selling in. So either you want to become a specialist in certain neighborhoods, in certain cities or certain suburbs, or you want to become a generalist and you want to acquire the skills required to be a generalist. I would be more of a neighborhood generalist. I know pretty much every suburb. I know pretty well. I know better than the average agent because I help people relocate. But some people only do one suburb, right? They only do one neighborhood within a suburb, and that's, you know, their thing. But don't get too bogged down if you don't know a neighborhood particularly well. I think some people would basically be stopped dead in their tracks just because they don't have an idea or have any information on a neighborhood. But the reality is, just do the work to learn about the neighborhood, and eventually you'll stack neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood. You'll be able to speak to the schools, the commute, the overall vibe, the housing stock, just by doing volume. Another one of the sort of classic concepts is to have printed MLS like printouts of every single house. I personally think that's kind of dinosaur shit. And what are we doing wasting all that paper when a link does exactly the same thing? Some people will say that you should have like a feedback form or like a progress report or like grades for each house. I actually don't believe that. I think just teach your clients to keep their favorite listing in their mind. So obviously listing 1 would be their favorite listing if it's the first listing they've seen. But then by listing 2, do they like 2 or 1 better? Most people think that way. Most people genuinely view houses that way, where the favorite house that they've seen is just kind of the one that will rise to the top. You know, the cream will rise to the top, if you will. And I generally think sort of teach your clients to think about it like a tournament, right? Where it's basically winner takes all. If house 1 beats house 2, house 1 is the current champ. And then if house 4 beats house 1, house 4 is the current champ. I think that that actually really helps people make their decisions, because it's really not that crazy that every house would have a ranking somewhere along the ranking. And very few people would ever want to offer on their second favorite house. I think another pretty big one, pretty helpful one, is to treat every showing like an opportunity to educate your clients. Even if your clients have bought and sold homes before, you're the expert, and you should be the expert, and you should have things that you can teach them. Houses change over time. If somebody hasn't bought a house in 10 years, new houses are different than houses were 10 years ago. There's new tech, there are new elements of HVAC that did not exist 10 years ago. And if you can be an expert, if you can even just have an idea about these things, and even a somewhat seasoned buyer will probably start to think a little more highly of your opinion. So I think I want to make this sign, which actually I literally found in Oregon. I don't think I've ever told Paul this. Found this in Oregon. It was knocked off of a sign on this route, and I took it and I mailed it home from Oregon. It cost like $100 to mail it home, but it's cool. And I want to attach these legs to the bottom of it and make it the table we're gonna sort of set up in that room as maybe a desk, maybe a card table or something like that. One thing I think that maybe people aren't prepared for when they're new agents is the potential that you might run into a luxury buyer sooner than you expect. And I'll do another video on just helping luxury clients, luxury buyers, because I think there's maybe a lot to know, but I would say you should try to figure out what style they're into, what architectural style, what design style they're drawn to, and then you should study that as much as possible. All of these different architectural and design styles have a variety of things about them that make them unique to that style. So if it's Craftsman, if it's Cape Cod, if it's brand new build or super hyper modern, contemporary, mid-century, have an idea of the design elements of those styles so that you can be more fluent and you can talk to them about the things that they like. And also, then you will know for the next client who likes that style. But I would say do some research if you're not familiar with those build styles, design styles, thematic elements. Do some research ahead of really digging into helping those clients. A lot of people would love to be luxury agents, right? Because it means, you know, higher commissions and maybe more prestige and stuff like that. But the more educated your buyer is, the more educated you have to be. I think there's a little bit of a parabolic curve there too, where if a client is more educated, you have to be even more educated than them. You probably want to be a step ahead of each client or several steps ahead of each client for them to feel like they're in good hands. They're gonna throw things your way. They're gonna throw questions your way, even if they're not trying to test you. And if you look clueless or seem clueless or answer falsely, they're gonna see through that. And then lastly, you gotta get good at scheduling. Scheduling is one of the more complex and sort of like logistical aspects of the job that you don't necessarily think you're going to be doing, but making sure that you have a schedule that doesn't leave too many gaps and also allows enough overlap. So if you run long or you go short, you have somewhere to go. I like to maybe leave room or keep in mind which listings are go and show and which listings wouldn't require, you know, approval from the seller, so that I can potentially scoot those around if I have to. I typically do hour-long showings, but I overlap every 30 minutes. And that way, if I run short or long, I have enough of a grace period to keep things moving and not have, you know, my buyers just kind of twiddling their thumbs waiting for the next showing. And you got to get really good with a calendar, but also really good with routing. A few hacks. Within showing time, if you're in the computer, the desktop platform, they sort of have a routing thing worked into it that can be really, really helpful. But I'm not in front of my computer that often, so I typically have to use Google Maps to figure out that routing. Google Maps is better than Apple Maps for that because you can add multiple stops. I know Apple Maps can, it's not as easy in my opinion as with Google Maps, but making sure that you're accounting for drive time, right? That you have a concept of how far each suburb is from another suburb, depending on the time of day. Those are all skills that you will get better and better at, but they're very, very important. And all those things combined should allow you to be really good as a showing agent, and getting really good as a showing agent, I think really will help everything else down the line. It will help you as a listing agent because you'll understand how buyers think. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.